Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to continue on Daf Yomi and Daf 10a. Yesterday we were discussing the status of underneath a Korah and as well as between Lechi, where the question was that an area you're allowed to use or not allowed to use? And several ramifications have said din, whether that was because of the Mechitza being the purpose of the Korah being Mishum Heker. And therefore, if you're underneath it, you can't necessarily recognize it's there, or based on whether the Korah makes it as if it's an actual wall underneath it, and the question of whether the inner wall or the outer wall is what makes it, and a whole bunch of variations of that. And we were talking about, if you had a floating Korah, or if you had a Korah that's a little bit, that's off from one wall, what would its status be? And we were discussing a lot of details around the edge of the Mavoi. And today we're continuing on in that note as we are on Daf 10a Aleph, about 15 lines down. Tani Rabbi Zakkai. So that's what we're up to. Also across from there's an interesting drawing in Rashi about of the Korah Tzluya, where there's a Korah attached to the diagonal beam, so it's like right next to that picture. Okay, so Tani Rabbi Zakkai, Kamed Rabbi Yochanan, Ben Chayim, V'Tacha Korah Nidung Karmel. So now it's what we were saying before, which is basically question: is it mutter or usher to carry there? Now we're saying what status does it have, and is that so we have the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it's actually a carmelit. It's in between. It's neither mutter nor usher. It's in between K. It's in between things. Right about the Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah. It's somewhere in between. So Amar Lay. So then the rest of the Medrash says, "Puk Tani Dula." Basically, go teach this outside. Don't teach it here because basically we don't think that's correct. Amar Bai Mistabra Milte Rabbi Yochanan Tachat Korah. So then Beit said, wait, I can explain Rabbi Yochanan's statement in terms of why underneath the Korah you could say it's considered to be a carmelit. About Ben Chai and Asur. I could, right, so you could explain why the Korah is one or the other, but the area that Shimon Lechi is, that everybody agrees is Asur, because there's no possibility of it being a wall, so there's from Heker, and there's no way you'll be able to recognize the Lechi if you're playing right on the edge right there. So the Rabbi Amar Ben Chaim Nami Mutar. The Rabbi was like, no, I can explain why you could even play between the side posts, why it would still be Mutar. Amar Rabba Manam Yinala. So Rabbi says, so where do I know this from? So the Chi Ata Rabdimi Amar Yochan Makom She'ein Bo Arba Mutar L'Vnei Rosh Hashanah L'Vnei Shatiachid L'Katef Alav L'Vad Shelo Yachlifu. So if there's an area right at the edge of Shidra, which is an area that's 4 amot by 4 amot, everybody is allowed to everybody's allowed to use it. You just can't switch. I think because it's considered to be a state that's accessible for both the Shidra and the Shidra. That's number 99. So then you're allowed to both of you are allowed to rest things on it. Just make sure you don't switch, because once you switch, then you between the Rishuyot, then you'll violate an Isser. And there it also has to be at least 3 tefachim tall. Otherwise, that wouldn't be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to use it like that. Amar Baye, so how do we know that the end of this case here, this case right here, has to be at least 3 tefachim tall? So the Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria Amar Rav Toch Petach Tarich Lachi Acher Hatira. So I'm going to say, why do you know that in between needs something else to fix it? So we're talking about a case where you have a lechi inside of the petach, where there's already distinct doorway. You put a lechi there. You will need another lechi in order to fix it, right? Then just because you already have a petach by the mavoi, you need to have an actual lechi, which is specifically meant to remind you is that they're transitioning from mavoi to Eruvin is what you need, as opposed to as opposed to them saying it's fine. Because you could say that the two sides of the entrance are as if you have two lechis. We're saying no, that doesn't work. They're trying to compare this to the case of between the lechis we're mentioning before. So now the chitema to eat bay arbal arba, and if you want to say that area we're talking about in the middle there, the entryway, most demarcated by the olive, is an area that's 4 amot by 4 amot. Hamar Rav Chanin bar Rava Amarav. So petach al b'shein bo all bar arba starts lachir. But then we have Rav Chanin bar Rava who's split, and so the name of Rav that explicitly that if the petach isn't 4 amot by 4 amot, it's not. It's technically its own space. You still need a lechi to fix it in order to be able to use that area. But Rava, so how does Rava deal then? That's supporting a bias. So what does Rava do? Rava hatam the batur of Carmelite. Well, it's just a Rabim. Mashari. So Rava says, I can understand you're talking about they'll bring up to Carmelite. Why would you say that being the case? Because when it's Carmelite, so you treat it as the Carmelites, and that would allow you, and that would be sufficient. But if it's opening up into the Rishus Rabim, how could that be mutter? So it's Shiva Ba'ara, B'Gira, B'Shmei Shmaya. So what did he do? Okay, one moment. Okay, so this is an idiom. Sorry, I just had to look that one up. That Yitzhak Ba'ara B'Gira B'Shmei Shmaya. That something is where somebody is basically it's hard. Basically, we're saying that it means one thing in Beit Medrash Shamala versus people not in real life, which are differently. Right? So literally translated as a permanent resident on the ground and a stranger up to the highest heaven, meaning that even though you could make the argument. It's definitely you shouldn't make that argument. So, right. So why would you say that it's considered to be aser? So in Matzamin at Minovenayer, what happens is that because once you have since the Carmelite that's outside or the Rishus Ram is outside is considered to be similar enough to the area between the Petach between the Lachis. So that area is there's a concept of matzamin and minovene, or that once there's two things that are of similar status next to each other, they'll affect each other. Meaning instead of treating them as distinct, you'll say since one is us, the other one's us as well, and that's what's happening here. So therefore, when it opens into a Carmelite, it'll turn the entryway into a Carmelite as well. Whereas if it's open into a Thrab, it would not have. Okay.
No, but Rabbi, aren't we saying that that previous idiom that it's counterintuitive? Because you would think, isn't almost like a kal v'chomer that you would think if you need it for a Carmelist, of course you would need some kind of lechi for Rishus Rabim because the Avera would be so much greater going into a Rishus Rabim as opposed to a Carmelist, no?
Correct. Just the thing is, we're more worried not necessarily about what level of Israel would be violating. It's a question of whether or not you'll be able to know the difference and be aware of that and avoid the mistake.
You're saying that you would know that it's more likely you know the difference if there was a Rishus Rabim as opposed to a Carmelist?
Yes, and also the fact that when we're saying that the area between is similar enough to the area outside, therefore they combine as if they're one area, and therefore we need a different fix. So that makes a lot more sense for Rishus Rabim because nobody thinks that the entryway to the Mavoi is Rishus Rabim. It would be closer to being like the Mavoi itself. But if the entrance to the Mavoi is considered to be a Carmelite, and there's a Carmelite outside, so then you've got a Carmelite missing the Carmelite, and therefore it would take more to fix it than if it was their Rishus Rabim, because you'd be fixing from a different angle. As opposed to fixing what's inside, you're trying to fix towards what's outside.
Okay.
Okay. Back to the Gemara. So Amalei Rav Huna Braid Rav Yoshua Larava Va'at Latifra to Ben Asur. So and now Rav Huna is asking Rava, wait, do you really think that It's not. You don't think that it's usher to carry ben l'chaim. Ha'amar Rabba bar Barakana Amar Yochanan Mavui she'ritafo b'chayayin pachot me'arba badal l'chlokot Rabbi Shimon bar Gamliel v'Rabbanan. So, let's say when somebody decided to put up a lot of lechis on one side of the wall, so that in the diagram, that's diagram number 102, or if you wanted to be seen from above, you can see it in number I guess 104, 104, right? So, all right, 102, 103, 104. Different ways when we say that you put up multiple lechis going back, right? So, again, we'll see how far it goes back, but the point is that that's going to be the problem. Also, you also have the photo in the above view in the Gemara as well, courtesy of Tosafot. So in that case, that's the case where there's a machloket between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbanan. So now what's that machloket? Now the Gemara explains. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel damar amrian lavud mishtamesh achado hapnimi shel lechi pnimi. So according to Rabbi Gamliel, it says that this case allows you to say lavud. You can use up till the innermost edge of the innermost post, but no more. Meaning you'd get a lot less area. But according to the Rabbanan, it says this is not a valid case to try and apply lavud to. Therefore, you get to the inner edge of the post farthest to the end, as opposed to one farthest in. But as you see from there, whether the question is either are next to all the lechis asur, or is it just the last one? But that's just a question of which is you consider to be your lechi, or all four lechi, or is the last one lechi? But according to both Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, ben l'chaim is asur. So how are you saying that it's mutter to carry ben l'chaim between the posts, right, corresponding to the posts? So how do I answer you? You're right. It should be, but I think that case is where it's open to Carmelites, and the issue of Chazar must be an open to Chazar that basically since the area between the posts is like a Carmelite, and the area and then the Mavoi is open to the Carmelite. That's why it mixes together, and why you need another lechi, but and that's the reason for that. Aval Shutarabim, my shari. So what you're saying that if it opens to Shutarabim, then you would be allowed to carry in between l'chaim? Yes, like, again, you're wrong, right? That doesn't make sense. How's that? No, it does. As we said before, how does it work? Since the area by Lechis is considered to be close enough to being a Carmelist, and then outside is a Carmelist, so we say that each is type bound on type, and then it got mixed together again. Therefore, it goes after being a Carmelite, and therefore it would be equivalent, and therefore if you want the effects, you'll be able to carry according to Rav. Okay, so now we're turning the down to the Tedamavet. Rav Ashi Amar Gigon Shirtafo B'Chayayim Pachot Na'arba B'Meshach Arba Amar. So Rav Ashi says, what is the case? Is that you lined it up? Is that you line the whole area with lechis, each time less than 4 amo over the course of four amo. So each one is less than 4. Each of those in 4 tzvachim, i.e., so therefore it's an area that's not quite leveled yet, and then the whole area there is amo. That's diagram number 104. Okay, that's diagram number 104. So that's what we did. So what's the status then? So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So again, we're going to Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi like we had before. Shimon Gamliel, Amar, Amrian Lavod have a lay mavoi. So according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, it says that we would apply Lavod in this case. Therefore, you have the mavoi. Therefore, that means this whole inner region, where this 4 amot, would then be its own considered to be another mavoi, and therefore you need an additional lechi to machir ben l'chayayim. But the Rabbanan would say in this case is not lavud. You wouldn't need another one because you already are covered, right? Because for Rabbanan you need to have a lechi. Lavud is 3 tzvachim. For Shimon Gamliel, a lechi is 4 tzvachim. For Shimon Gamliel, yeah. have a question? I guess not. We'll continue on. Will Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel de Amar Amir Lavod Havelei Mavoi? All right, so again, the question there is the whole machloket is based on is level 3 or level 4. It has nothing to do with it, and therefore the machloket it doesn't have anything to do with the question of Sezer and the Chayayim. Well, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, lehabe kanir v'achuz v'shav mifnim. So according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, do you really need another post? Can't we say that this case is similar to the case where outside you can see it very well, but inside cannot? So for that region. So that's diagram number 105, where we see near mibachutz means that you see there's a little bit jutting out. Right. So we have our multiple posts lined up, and then we have a little bit sticking out. So in that case, we're talking about that case. So there. Right, so that if you can see, so there it will be different between when you're in the area by the Chaim, right? You don't necessarily notice when you transition, but from outside you can clearly tell it where it is. So Mide Utama El Rabbi Yochanan. So that opinion with that, so that would Ravashi's answer of Rabbi Bachut Shabbat would only work for Rabbi Yochanan. Whereas, right, as it says, as we heard by Rabbi quoting Rabbi Yochanan, that if you can see it from outside, but it's considered to be flush with the wall from the inside, it's not considered to be a lucky because it's not noticeable for the people inside, so it's not good. So now we're going back to talk a little bit more about what it means by nira mivachut shav mivnim. So it must nira mivnim shav mivachut. Now we're talking about that parallel. Okay, so what you mentioned, in fact, you see from outside, not from inside. We can do the reverse. You can see it from inside well, but from the outside, the street, you can't see it. All right, so then it would be considered to be a lachi. So that would be the case. Do we have a diagram? Which one would that one be? Here. Here, that would be number 1. That would be number 107. Where basically on the inside you see it, but on the outside it's like a continuation of the wall. Right? So there's clearly something sticking out for you're leaving the mavoi, but if you're walking in, you don't necessarily notice that there's anything like different standing there waiting for you. Okay, so that's the case we're talking about. So but if you can see from the outside and from the inside you can't see it. Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Chadamar. Right, so we have Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon reporting the opinion of Rabbi, and we have Machlokas what Rabbi's opinion was. Chadamar nidu mishum lachi. One of them says that you treat this as if it's a lachi. Chadamar nidu mishum lachi. One said you treat it as if it's as if it is a lachi, and the other one says no, it's not a lachi. The question is whether or not it's considered to be good based on the fact that the people inside can't necessarily see it being a distinct lachi to remind them. This time, Rabbi Chia to Amar Nido Mishum Lachi. So let's say that. So let's conclude that Rabbi Chia is the one who says that it's considered to be a valid lachi. The Rabbi Chia, Kotel Shetido Achad Kones Kones Mechabero, Bench Ner Bachut. Because basically, we have another statement of Rabbi Chia where he says that if you have a wall that is off a bit from the entryway, right? Whether that means that it is equal for the people inside can't notice it, but outside can, or the reverse. Either way, it's considered to be a valid lechi, even with a wall sticking out. So if that's for a case of a wall, that's called a lechi. That'd be more so for an actual lechi. Rabbi Yochanan, wait, did Rabbi Yochanan not hear about what Rabbi Chia had said? Like, why didn't he address it? So Ela Shmiele, V'lo Savarla. Rather, he heard about that opinion and didn't hold of it. Rabbi Chia didn't hold it in the end either.
Well, can you just explain that, Rabbi? Can you just explain the case of Rabbi Chia what was it where the wall was a little bit off? Was that a case? My question is, was that a case where they could see it from the outside but not from the inside?
It's either one here. It's the here. You have a wall when you have here. This is one. A lechi is you added it when you stuck a post to the wall, right?
Okay.
Therefore, it's clearly distinct from the wall. So Rabbi Chia's opinion is that if you have a wall sticking out, that does not look like it's continuous, but it's still a wall, not simply a post tacked on. That's sufficient for it to be considered to be a lechi.
And you can see it from inside or outside.
Right, visible from the outside or from the inside, and visible from the other side to see. Either way, that would be sufficient. That slightly off wall.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about.
So you could see it either place. So what would even be the issue?
No, because the issue is that it's either hard to see for people inside the mavoy, or it's hard to see for people in there out on the Shitr Rabbi. One party has difficulty seeing it, because as long as one party can see it properly, it doesn't matter which one, it's still a valid lechi.
Okay, thank you.
Because he has a lower standard needed.
Okay.
So. Okay. Now, back. So that was just time about Rabbi Chia's opinion. Why he said? Well, you know what he said. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan, he said, no, we may have heard of that star that we just been talking about. Rabbi Chia, not a list of us. So if Rabbi Yochanan rejected it, maybe Rabbi Chia rejected it in the end as well. Hi, my. So who's the person who has this opinion? So I understand you want to say that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold it in the end, and that's why he admitted it. Fine. But Rabbi Chia, if he's the one who, if he doesn't think that the svara makes sense, why did he teach it? If it's quoted that we quoted in his name. So what's going on here? So Amarabba Baravuna near Bachut Shavim. So now, again, Rabbi Rahuna says this case where you can see the outside, but you can't tell from the inside because it's flush. Nidonu Shalachi, it's considered Valachi. Then Amar Rabba, Motzinan Vishmashmajtin. Now we're going to ask you a question based on the Mishnah. Chat Dektana, Shatala Gdola, Gdola, Tana Masura. Shel Gdola. So that's a case where the people in the Chat there. So the people in a small hut there, the walls fall down, and now it's connected to the large hut there. So the large hut there can still carry, but the small one can't. So because now the small hut there, as if it's an entryway into the larger hut there, and when you're standing in the large hut there, you can clearly see that it becomes smaller by the small hut there. So that's the near Bifnim, right? So therefore it's near Bifnim, they can see, but right, but from Bimachut, i.e., if you're in the Chatzar Kana, you can't see that the walls shifting as well, because it's not really apparent from where they're standing. So therefore, she said, so we're going to try to set it in the same place. So the imita, and if Rabbi Chia had held of the statement that no matter whether inside or outside sees it, then in the case of the small courtyard that opens into the large courtyard with a wall between them divided and fell down, then you also did a lot of calorie in the small cut there, based on the fact that the larger cut there can see clearly where the demarcation is. Yet we say that they can't. So Amar B'Zera, but nothing called the like Dana Lugdola. Rather, what is the case? It's where the walls of the smaller one protrude into the larger one. So therefore, it's not considered to be fully flush, and therefore, if you can notice it there, then that's why you can carry both the Nekana and the Gdola. But it's not a case of where it's near Mechus Shavim or Shavim near Mechus, because actually they can both see it. It's both near on both ends.
A quick question: is it understood?
Yeah.
That in order to carry in the big one and I guess in the small one, they'd have to make an Erev Chaseris as well?
In this case, if you want to carry between the two regions, yes, but the point now is that each region is considered to be mutar. So before Shabbos, we assume that each Chatzar made their own Eruv, not with each other, because they each made an Eruv.
You're breaking up, Rabbi. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Each Chatzar had its own separate Eruv. They did not make a unified Eruv, because if it had made a unified Eruv, it wouldn't be a problem if that wall fell down.
Right.
Okay, so when we say the protrusion case,
am I the only one who did not hear a word?
Yeah, we're hearing this, Joel. Can you hear me?
You are hearing it?
Yeah.
I can hear you. Yes. Okay, so I didn't hear what the rabbi said. Okay, fine.
So I'll try and explain again. So when you have the small Chatzar into the larger one, so the small Chatzar is the one that, right? So the small Chatzar, each of them beforehand could both carry in their areas, because one of them had done either is only owned by one person, or they had done an Eruv already, each one separately. When it falls down, the question is, can they continue treating them as if they're separate regions or not? So if there's some indication that they're different, then that's enough to each one carry on their own in the region. When they carry between two distinct Chatzars, that would require an Eruv Chatzarot, which they wouldn't have put up. If they put it before, that wouldn't be a problem. If they had it, then they'd have a problem right now. That's why we say it's asur, because they wouldn't have the rights to use that area. Okay, and when we say that there's when they stick out, right? That's why it's relatively clear, because it's because you see the diagram here, you see how there's like a difference in size, right? It's jutting out awkwardly, so therefore once it's doing that, that's enough for you to notice where it is, right? Once it's not simply like, an abrupt change, but it's like, there's this little jutting out gap, that's what allows you to treat them as still distinct areas. Okay? Okay. So the lema lavud v'tishtare. So why don't we say that lavud applies? All right, sorry. I said that incorrectly. So the case with the sticking out walls is actually bad, because as in the diagram, basically these walls are sticking out. It's very noticeable for the larger one, but for the inner one, right? They're not so visible here. So the overhead view in 113 is a little bit better than the side view. So still 113, the overhead view. So let's say where it goes in a significant portion into the larger one. So in that case, so why don't we say, right? So now we're going to try and fix this problem and say, why should they both be allowed? We're going to say they should both be allowed because. So now we're saying, so why is it a problem? So that should be a problem, because only one can see it, and one other one can't. So blame a love of a tishrei. Why don't we say the love it applies, and therefore you'd be able to carry the larger one, because you could say that the gap in between has been filled in of the small chatzar which fell down, and once that's been filled in, then it has a valid wall again, and we can utilize it. So so why don't we say that? Okay, time out the miflagi tuva. If you say this, that maybe, and if the wall, say the walls is too big for the love to apply, because the gap between the wall here is more than 3 or 4 tefachim, whether it's Rabbi Yochanan or the Chachamim, like let's say more than that. So, Tani Rav Ada Barvimi Kamei Rabbi Yechina Katana be'Ester Gdola b'Chadas. That there's what is the we have a statement that in the name of Rav Ada, the son of Avimi, that if it's smaller, you can even have it be, if it's small, the limit is that for love would apply as 10, but if it's a larger chatzar, then it's 11, and then shouldn't that also be fine, and we should be allowed to use lavud? So Amar Ravina, b'muflugin mikol tel zeh b'shnayim, mikol tel zeh b'arba. What is the case where one wall is 2 away So looking at the diagram, so we're saying that one of these small gaps is 2, right, over here, right? So one of the gaps on these sides is only 2, and one of them is 4. So one of those sides, we can say it levels to the wall of the larger chatzer. Like so this area between here gets filled in. Right, that area gets filled in. But the other side is 4, and if it's 4 or more, then everybody agrees you can't fill it in. That would be
so that would mean that it's not centered as it appears in the picture. It would be more to one side, therefore there'd be more of a gap. Is that what we're saying?
Right. It's not to scale, is it?
correct.
Right. So the actual picture that we're seeing
Correct.
is not accurate. We'd have to make an adjustment to it, correct? For this new.
Correct. It's in different numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. As they say in many standardized tests or diagrams, the image is not to scale.
Okay. Perfect.
So that's the case where the sides are different sizes, therefore one necessarily works. So that's fine if say both walls can't be counted as as being equivalent now, but you say one wall, it's the one that's only 2 away from the other one, and we'll say that one's good, and that'll help us write the rest of it. So Rebbe, rather let's go on to the opinion of Rebbe. Damer Shnei Pasa. When he says Lechi, you need to have one leg on each side. One's not enough. The Tanya Chatzer Niter Pasachad, as he says, a Chatzer can be fixed with one pas, with one piece of upright board on each side. With Lechi. But Rebbe Omer says Shnei Pas, you need to have 2 Lechis, one on each side in order to fix the breach. One board is not sufficient to fix that breach from the Chatzer. You would need 2. And since only one of those walls can consider to be able to be fixing the breach, for the other one is not considered to be valid for fixing the breach. I might. So now the Gemara is going to say, like, wait, how are we doing this? Why are we comparing the Chatzer and the Mavoi? Because they're different. Because one's a Rishut Yachid and one's a Carmelite. So how are we comparing these things? So I understand if you want to be talking about the case of visibility's sake, and only do mishum lechi, right? Whether or not that's considered to be lechi or not. Rabbi Savar Lach, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yanaleta, Mishum Hachik, Tana Bestar, Gola Bachadas, Rabbi Mishum, Rabbi Savar Lach, Rabbi Yossi. If you want to talk to me about the question of the sizes of the posts and whether or not that can end up closing up the size of the gaps, fine, those could apply across. But in which one are we talking about? We can't look which part is the one that we're trying to here. So right now we're here's one this is a little more to scale for the photo above, right? So this one down here, 118 is one more to scale. Still not precisely, but it's easier to tell there. Yeah. Okay. Again, so this is so now we're just going to go back and explain what each of the post case we're arguing about is. This is the case where again, there's a cut there. This wall fell down or had been larger, and now we're trying to tell you to remind you that you can carry in the cut there, but not in the Shizarabim, because the wall fell down and the gap here was too large. So again, it's put in a post in order to lessen this gap here. Because if the gap is a gap of 10 or more, then that means that we treat the cut there like the area that's connected to the Rabim, because if there's a gap there's a breach that is too large and it's not an entryway, that ruins the status of the cut there. Okay, and that's photo 119, right? So that was the one we said about where you put the posse, and the posse would be putting up another board on each side. Okay, so which one we're talking about? You have to decide whether we're talking about near name, talking about the maximum width of the pirza, right? Or talking about there's 1 or 2 passes. So which one is it? Eliyah Mart near Milkos Shabbatim, Jidushim Lachi. So let's say that we're dealing with the case where they can tell from inside that it's the wall, but from outside they can't. Sorry, from outside they can see it, but inside the mud where they can't. Jidushim Lachi, and then we say that in that case it's considered to be bad Lachi. But Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Vananita, or the Rebbe loves over love, so if you want to say that they're in agreement in the case of Nira Mechus Shabbatim that is considered to be a valid lechi. Then what about, then we don't know, that doesn't tell us anything about the case of where the gap is 11. But then we only found fixed one side of it. So, what does he say? If the purpose is to allow and to allow us to use the larger area, the larger cut there, the ether then it should be enough if you simply have it to be 10 and 2 tvachim, because it's 10 amot, and then the extra 2 tvachim would be fine due to lavud. The even Mr. And if you're trying to allow these smaller one, then it's the case where they're much farther, where the two walls are even farther removed. Because because we're talking about the cap only being 2, if we're trying to fix the smaller one, we should be talking about a larger, because we're talking about a larger gap then. All right? So it's saying it doesn't seem to be, the language seems to fit. We're talking about trying to make sure that the large cut there is much, not the small cut there. To me, it would not be a good case. So we're trying to argue this whole time of what the status of Ben the Chaim is. It would be helpful for that then. If we're talking about the case of the larger cut there, which in our analogy would then be our mavoi, as opposed to being the entryway where the lechi is. So now we'll go back to our conclusion. So elalav shma mina nir b'chush mifnim enu nidun mishum lechi shma mina. So rather we conclude that if you can see it from outside and inside it's level, it's flush. It's not considered to be a lechi. So, and then and then coming out, that we conclude that way, right? That's what we learn from that statement. Correct. So Amar of Yosef, Lo Shmiya Li Lahashmatata. So Yosef says, I didn't hear what Rav Huna said, right? So he's trying to ask, to explain how we got here. He's saying, you want to tell me that Rav Huna said that, but I never heard that. So he's saying, so explain. So I'm like, by out the Martin Yelan. So he says, so the Beit says, wait, but didn't you tell it to us? Aha, Martin Yelan. So he's saying, no, actually you taught it to us. Right? And now we're going to explain what context he taught it to them. Right? So basically the issue here is that Rav Yosef forgot some of his teaching from his Rebbe Rav Huna. So, and now we're saying that these are quoting a deed, and he's like, wait, but I don't remember Rav Huna teaching that. So it's all predicated on that statement. So he's like, well, where do you know that statement being true from? Like, it's a quote support for that statement. So now Abaye is reminding his teacher, who had gotten sick and forgotten his learning, in this regard, what to do. So now we're going back. Now we're explaining when Rav Yosef said that statement, because he said Rav Yosef said, "Amar Rami bar Abba Amar Rav Huna, Lechi Moshech etop no shel mavoi." So Lechi continues on the length of the mavoi. Palkom arba amot nidom mishum lechi. If it's less than 4 amot, it's going to be lechi. Mishtamash imo chodov nimi. And then you can also carry from the innermost edge. Arba amot nidom mishum mavoi. But if that area is lechi is 4 amot long, then that area becomes on mavoi. Therefore, the whole area is usher to be used. Okay, so that's case number 120. Right, where you basically put the lechi on the end, right? So basically, we had a lechi that we had other that's not quite even. They put a lechi on one side to extend the inner wall. Question is, can you carry across from that lechi, across from that wooden piece you tacked on? So you're allowed to carry as long as it's less than 4 amot, because it's less than 4 amot, it's not considered its own distinct area. Once it's 4 amot long, then it's its own distinct area, and you got a mavoi into another mavoi, and you need to fix the mavoi because there's no lechi there anymore. So the 2 mavois that have not been corrected yet. Okay, so now we're going to analyze this statement. So, and you said that we can learn three things out from this one statement, that one BAYT that we had earlier, right? So, Shamina, Ben Lechai and Asur. So, what can you learn out from here? That cross from the Lechi is Asur, right? Because if you don't, right? Because look at the photo, then we have the case corresponding to where the Lechi should be for the innermost region is Asur, because it says Chodot Pnimi, right? So Chodot Pnimi is right. So again, if we say Chodot Pnimi, that is where the white meets the gray in the diagram, right? So Chodot Pnimi means that the entirety of the corresponding part of the Lechi, assuming the Lechi isn't too large, is Asur, which means that Ben Lechayim corresponding to the Lechi is Asur. So that's the first thing we learn off of that statement. Ushmamina. Meshach Mavoy Arba. We also learned that the largest area to give for a continuation of a Mavoy before it becomes a distinct Mavoy is 4 Amos. So that's the maximum size of the Lechi before the Lechi creates its own Mavoy. We also learned that in case where it's flush on the inside, but from the outside you can see it very clearly, that's considered to be a valid Lechi. Right? Because as you see from the diagram here, right on the inside it's flush. But somebody's coming from the outside, they can distinctly tell that it goes from being a proper wall to being a Lechi. But on the inside, you can't necessarily tell because it's a smooth transition.
This might be a silly question, Rabbi, but I presume it's not. I'm not saying it's a different color in reality, because then you could see that it was different. Right? It looks like a wall from
Correct.
the inside.
Right. We're not correct.
Because all you'd have to do is make it a different color, and then you'd know, even if it was flush.
Correct. There's also a fun machloket halacha about what the how thick a lechi needs to be, and there are opinions that lechi that we'll get to it in the Gemara hopefully. That basically you can have a very thin lechi, we're being let's say like just paint.
Yeah.
So you're right. We're not assuming color change.
It's indistinguishable in the inside.
Right.
Correct.
But Rabbi, is that the idea that how thick a lechi has to be? Because when we say you're not allowed to carry between the lechi, is that understanding that the lechi is so narrow that you wouldn't be a hecker and you might go in outside of the mabui?
No, I was talking about, say, if you put the lechi against the wall, lechi is really thin. That's what I was talking about. We'll get there.
Okay.
Hopefully about the minimum width for lechi, but
it's all around how distinguishable it is from the wall.
Correct.
As long
it's
as
a hecker, right?
Right, it has to be a hecker. So the question is, does it need to have actual depth difference, or just that it has to be visibility difference?
Beautiful.
So that's the look at there.
So what's the reason why you can't carry in between the lechi? Is that for hecker, or that you wouldn't recognize it if you're?
The lechi is because the lechi is what the demarcation is. Either we said it's because it's not sufficient hecker, or because the area is usher because you'll make a mistake, or because of a neighbor. Right. So the reason why we have to discuss the lechi is because of either you can't notice the hecker there, or because of a neighbor at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So let's try and do it. The So then we say the halakha. Therefore, at the end of the day, is that if you can see, if you can see it from outside, but with inside, it's considered to be a lech. It's considered to be kosher lechi. Wait, but then we just ask, wait, how can we have refuted it earlier, but we say we passed it in that way? What's going on? You're right. We did, but since we have an explicit statement saying that it works, so our svarot are nice, but since we have an explicit statement saying that we can do it, we can do it. Okay? And now, okay, so the next section, so I'll pause there for the next section. And today we spent a lot of time talking about the area in between and whether it goes, whether it's mutter or asur. So again, we're having two dots. So again, so we're discussing about the area between the lechi and between the korah. Today is almost entirely between the lechi. Question is also lechi that's visible from the outside or the inside, whether or not that's considered to be kosher or not. And we've tossed as far as in both directions based on whether it's inside, go outside. Is it based on his ability to recognize it or not? And then we go to the end that why do we say that it's good either way? Is, well, even though again all the svars are good, but the conclusion comes down to because Rabbi Chia stated that it's kasher. Even if we could have argued in the svar that it doesn't make sense, but since Rabbi Chia stated that therefore it's considered to be like a lechi, we conclude that it is like Rabbi Chia, and therefore you can carry. Therefore it would be mutar. Okay, so that's why we conclude like him. It's considered to be a lechi. It's considered to be a lechi, but you still can't carry in that area. Okay, so you're the same case.
Sorry, you just said it's considered to be a lechi, but you still can't carry in that area?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. That was the three shlominas we had. That we conclude that it is near Mekushav Bifnim.
Right.
Right, is a distinct conclusion from the area for the usage of the lechi. All right.
Okay.
So. Okay. So I think this will end today. Tomorrow, somebody else will be giving the daf because I will be on a plane on my way to North America.
Oh, very nice.
Okay. Also, if people would like me to set up an email list, I can. Just let me know if you'd like that. That way I could send send you things. But if unnecessary, I'll just as far as for now, the only that I have to I'll just mention it by word of mouth, I guess. If somebody's interested in a lot of the halakha l'maaseh, there's a lot of good books that have come out recently in that regard. There's a new one in English by Rabbi Jacker called Walking the Line. It's on Amazon. If you're interested in the more halakha l'maaseh side of it, as opposed to the as opposed to those we're doing, which is a little more theoretical. And there's also a whole bunch of other ones online. Also, if you're interested, I can file it.
Can you give us your email address?
There's a lot of good books that I'll. Yeah, so my email address is cmetzger at CMETZGER at torontotorah.com. It should be on the shul's website. Also on the Toronto Torah website. Or you can email me at chaimmetzger@gmail.com, just depending which one you remember, I guess. They'll go to the same place. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good day.
You as well.